Cubase 14 just came out, and I'm telling you, this is probably one of the best, if not the best, Cubase version ever. This upgrade is huge, and I'm not joking. Now, this is not going to be a quick video. There's a lot to cover, so grab your popcorn and let's do it. For the first feature we're going to look at, I've been waiting for this one for years, honestly, and it's the reordering of channels from the mix console. Okay, look at that. I can now change the order of any channels I see from the mix console by just dragging it to the location I want. That's it. It's very, very simple. I can move more than one if I want to. Let's say I want to move this channel and also this one, and let's say this one, I want to bring them right here. They're going to move all together. It's so practical. And the cool thing is that you can add a key command so you can speed things up. And moving channels around will also apply if you use the mix console straight in the lower zone of the project window. This next Cubase 14 feature is honestly my favorite so far. And it's insane. And I'm dead serious. And this one is called Modulators. Let's take a look. In the lower zone of the project window, we have now 2 extra tabs. Drum Machine, which we're going to look at later, and Modulators. And this opens the door to so much creativity. It's just crazy. So we have access to different modulators on every channels we have in Cubase. So that means on audio channels, effects channels, group channels, virtual instrument channels, of course. So let me show you just a simple example. Using this piano and drum groove. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is to add one modulator from this list. I have a choice between LFO, envelope follower, shaper, the macro knob, which is very cool. More on that later. Step modulator and mod scripter. I'm going to click on the envelope follower. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a connection. Okay. And this will allow me to make a connection between my modulator and some parameters that I have on my channel, which are listed right here. But I can also control some parameters of plugins and virtual instruments. And this is where things get crazy. So what I have on my channel is a volume plugin, which is new to Cubase 14. Okay, more on that later. So I'm going to click on Learn, and what I'm going to do is create my connections. And I want to control the master fader. Okay, so right now, if I click on play, okay, it's going to move the fader according to the envelope of my piano. But what I want to do is to use the envelope of my drum loop to control that volume fader of my piano channel. So I'm going to activate sidechain right here off the modulator. I'm going to go on my drum channel under sends, and now I will have my envelope follower sidechain available. I'm going to activate it, and now this is what I get. So I can play around with the general volume of that parameter, which is the fader in my case, and also the range. I can do it the other way around. Let's make it quieter and then bring the range to the negative. So it does the opposite movement. So it's very well done. This is just a quick example, and I can add more connections if I want to. So I have this arpeggiator by Retrolog. And I already worked on a bunch of different modulators. I have 4 modulators total. The first one is an LFO controlling the Retrolog filter resonance. So I'm going to click on the open destination. And there you go. So it opens the instrument. In this case, that is connected to my LFO. Next, I have another LFO to control the filter cutoff of that synth. A step modulator to control the panning of my channel. On this channel, I also have some plugins inserted. Okay, that I'm going to activate right now. I have the studio delay that is new to Cubase 14, shimmer, which is a very nice type of reverb, and again, the volume plugin. And those are controlled by the macro knob. I'm going to activate it. The first one controls the feedback of the delay. The second one, the gain of the volume fader. I have another one that controls the wet and dry signal of the reverb by playing around with the mix fader. And I also have one connection that controls this EQ band right here, okay? And everything works together. So I can control those parameters connected from this modulator by controlling this knob right here, manually using my mouse, or by right-clicking on this knob. I can assign it to a MIDI remote controller, which I already did on my side. So you get the idea. So this is actually very nice, but I can also have another modulator part of my list to control this macro knob. And I just need, again, to right click and select one of the available modulators listed that I have right here on my channel. So I'm using the second modulator, and there you go. I just need to activate it. It's right here, and let's have a listen. This is so cool. Again, I'm just scratching the surface on starting to work with the modulators, and I am impressed big time. So this one is great. In this version of Cubase, we also have another cool feature that is also pretty big, and this one is the drum track, aka drum machine and the drum patterns. Let's check this out. Okay, now at the bottom of the project window in the lower zone, like I showed you before, we have two extra tabs, and one of them is the drum machine. Okay, so by clicking on the drum machine, I'm gonna get this window. If I click on add drum track, it's gonna add a new drum track. Of course, I'm gonna name it test for now, and this is what I'm gonna get. Now I have like 16 pads where I can load some samples. I have recommended samples that are included with Cubase for kick, snares, hi-hats, toms, claps, and so on. And I can just select, drag them over, and create my drum kit from these samples. I can also import my own samples from the media bay if I want to, like I did on this drum track. Also note that the drum track feature is not a feature that will replace or is meant to replace Groove Agent. This drum machine here in Cubase 14 is a bit more designed for straight up drum loop making, okay? For pop music, EDM, R&B, and so on. And also very easy to access, like you just saw, you just click and you get your drum track created in a nick of time. And from this point, we can load our samples in the pads. We can modify also the tone of the pads. We can add a bit of saturation also, because I have like pads and effects that I can work with the bit crusher, distortion, another filter, and also an EQ like I have on this one. So I have a lot of control when it comes to tone shaping every sample I have on this drum machine. From the group tab on top, this is where we see all the samples loaded on the pads, where I can adjust the level, the panning, the amount of send signal I'm sending to the delay and the reverb, and also the output. Like in this case, for this drum track, I decided to create a separate output for every sample. Okay, so this way, if you look on top, all of my samples have their own fader and their own channel, basically, where on top of that I can add more plugins if I want to. Okay, so that gives me even more control. I can modify the delay parameters, the reverb parameters also, and all that good stuff. And on top of that, I also have access to some drum kit presets by clicking right here on top. And this is going to give me access to a bunch of presets included in Cubase. Just need to double click and there you go. On top of that, I can create a pattern, that the drum machine will be assigned to. I just need to double click straight on the audio event and that will create a drum pattern event. Okay, and if I double click on that event, it will open the drum pattern editing window. And from this point, I'll be able to just create some patterns straight from this window. I can create everything manually. I can decide to just add a pattern at every second or every fourth or third, and create my groove this way. There's also a randomization feature that is very practical. So I have different types of randomization, the musical, hybrid, and full randomization. So I'm going to keep it to musical. And from this point, I can do a full randomization of a groove, for example, or a pattern. Okay, it's a bit intense. I can reduce the percentage. From this point, I can also randomize a single sample if I want to. For example, this closed hi-hat, if I select it, I can just randomize by clicking that little dice here or right here on the track itself. I can add a bit of swing, play with the offset, all that good stuff. I can play with the swing feature for the whole pattern also. That's pretty cool. And at the bottom, I have access to velocity, the repeats, offset, probability. Now, I'm not going to go through all those features in this video because it's going to be a long video, but it gives you a very good idea on all the parameters you can work with. Now, something else I can do is to create more patterns on the same drum track. And these are the list of patterns I have on this drum track. So I have like 3 different patterns. And to move from one pattern to another, I do that straight on the drum track. So in this case, I have pattern 1 playing, and then it's going to jump to pattern 3. And the cool thing is I'm not limited to only one drum track. I can use several drum tracks if I want to. In this case, I have 2 of them, and the second one comes in the chorus. So now that you're done with your drum patterns, if you want, you can convert them into MIDI notes if you think that would be useful. And to do so, you can do it from one pattern only. Click on Convert Pattern Event to MIDI Parts, or select more than one. Let's say I select all of them, and I convert them all into MIDI parts, and there you go. Now the next feature is amazing for gain staging. It's the Curve Volume Automation 2.0. You know, when we clip gain an event. So I have an event right here. Usually, you know, with previous versions of Cubase, when I selected that event, I had a little node in the top center to bring the gain up or down of that event. Now, this is not existent anymore. It's been moved to the bottom left, and now you click and you have this little fader to clip gain your event. So that is something new here. And on top of that, we have the ability to make some automation straight in the audio event. We did before, but it was very, very limited. We were only able to bring the gain down with the pen tool. Now, if I select that pen tool again, this time around, I can select and create a bunch of different nodes and move them up or down, and I have the value in decibels listed, which is pretty cool. I can select more than one and move them up or down, which is awesome. Or just, you know, use the top little nodes to move the whole selection up or down, which is great. On top of that, I can create some Bezier curves like we have with our regular automations. You know, there you go. If I want to create a node, I just click. If I want to delete a node, I just click on Option or Alt if you're on PC, and I remove that node, and that's it, you know. Like I said, I can select several nodes together, and from that selection, I can, you know, increase, decrease the amount of gain. I can tilt left and right, up and down. I can also compress, you know, the envelope of that selection, or expand the envelope of that selection. I can also use the Range tool to make a selection, bring that selection up or down, and that will affect that curve volume automation. If I'm not satisfied and I want to reset the whole thing, I can select my audio event, go on top to audio, down to remove event volume curve, and I'm going to reset the whole thing to its original state. And as you can tell, I have the display of my curve automation straight on the audio event. Now, by default, you will only see that display when you hover with your mouse. But if, like myself, you want to keep it on all the time, just click on the Cubase settings. You go down to Event Display, click on Audio, and then you will see Show Event Volume Curve and set it up to always. Okay, by default again, it's set to on mouse over. That is a personal choice, and this is how you can do it. Talking about the selection tool, there's some new addition to the selection tool. So with a selection, I can now bring up or down the volume, the gain of that event without splitting the event. And that is pretty cool. I can slip the audio from that event from the inside again without having to split anything by keeping my fingers on Option and Command if I'm on Mac, or Alt and Control if you're on PC. And you will see that double arrow icon, and there you go. That means I can split that around pretty easily. I can do the same, selecting several events, do the same thing. It's gonna move them around. I can also create a range selection in between events. So for example, if I delete this event and I want to create a range here, I just double click using the range selection tool and my range is going to be selected. And if I want to select from the beginning of the project to the beginning of the next event, I double click before the event begins and I'm going to have that selection. On previous versions of Cubase, with a selection, I was able to move that selection around, okay? But now, if I keep my finger on Command or Control if you're on PC, I can actually move that selection with the actual audio. That is so cool. And if there's some audio after that selection, it's gonna move on top of it, you know, like you just saw. I can also mute a selection by clicking on Alt or Option and M. And as you can see, when I select an event, the selection is now color inverted, you know, which makes it way easier to work with. The lower zone in the project window have some improvements. First of all, the mix console is fully integrated now. So not only the faders, but now if I bring that up, there you go, I have the full mix console, which is awesome. So all of my tabs, routing, inserts, sends, cues, everything is accessible from the lower zone of the project window. And this is very, very nice. And something else is the size of every tab from the lower zone is adjustable independently from each other. So for example, if I want to keep my mix console at this height, but not the chord pads, when I go back to the mix console, it's still going to keep the size I set it up to, which is very, very practical. Next, we have 5 new plugins. The first one is a studio delay, which is a great plugin. It's a studio type delay with predefined patterns, which works pretty well actually, you know. So there's a filter bank which will be used as high pass and low pass filters basically. Now this delay brings a bit more color compared to a regular stock plugin delay. So there's parameters like age, which is gonna add a bit more of a old tape cassette type of vibe, modulation, distortion, reverb even on the delay, pitch, and of course, that's not an effect, but the mix balance knob here to balance the dry signal with the wet signal. The time signature is going to be here. You can tempo sync or do it manually, and you have all the time values right here. Spatial to 0 is going to be mono, and the more you increase the percentage of spatial, the wider the delay will sound like. Feedback, output, all that good stuff. So let's have a quick listen. And let's listen to the different patterns. It's pretty cool. For a stock plugin, it's a very good delay. Next on the list is also very nice. It's a reverb type of plugin, and this one is called Shimmer. And you're probably going to recognize this type of shimmer effect. Yeah, the pitch control is nice, you know, when you put it to plus 12, an octave higher from the original pitch, you get that kind of very nice shimmer effect that that lots of people know about. It's a great and different type of reverb to work with. Next on the list is Volume. It's a simple plugin. its job is to balance the volume with this fader, which is fully independent from the channel's faders. It's cool because you can readjust your gain structure, you know, once you add some plugins, and let's say, you know, after a few compressors or whatever you have on your channel, the signal is getting louder and louder, and you want to rebalance the level at some point. You can use this plugin and rebalance it out to keep the same gain structure. So that is one way you can work with it. But you can also use this plugin as a creative tool in conjunction with the modulators, like we saw earlier in the video. So that is a very good plugin to have. Next on the list is Underwater. Now this one is actually pretty nice. So this is a one knob filter, and you know, if we listen to a sample, you'll see exactly what it does. So it basically sounds like you're putting your signal underwater, or if you want to emulate, like let's say a sound system playing from the apartment next door, you know, you're probably gonna use something like this. Okay, so it's a pretty cool filter, very simple to use, straight to the point, and it's called Underwater. The next one is Auto Filter, very nice filter. You can also set it up to manual. Also a very good tool in pair with the modulators, new in Cubase 14. Okay, so that is a very good tool to use. That can be a very creative tool also. Supervision also had a little facelift as far as the colors goes on some of the modules, where we have access to a bit more selection when it comes to the colors, which makes it a bit more enjoyable to work with. Okay, now let me know down below which one you think out of these 5 plugins is the most promising. Also new is the new version of the score editor, which received a huge revamp. As you can see, the score editor is now built upon the Dorico technology. And like Dorico, it produces a more legible notation by default. Now note that this is not a replacement to the Dorico software. It's more of an addition to Cubase, so composers can have a way more smooth transition when going from Cubase to Dorico when composing music. I'm into a full orchestra piece of music, so I can select all the instruments shown right here in the notation window. I can be more specific and only select one, go from one to the other, so on and so forth. From the score menu on top, I can switch to page view, which is going to look more like a printed version. Now, this is not a tool that I work with on my side. I do not compose orchestration and stuff like that, you know, but for music composers, this is a huge win with Cubase 14. And the cool thing with this version of the score editor is that it's going to adapt to the instrument you work with. Like for example, drums. Before it was a bit like chaotic, you know, to have like a drum part in the score editor of previous versions of Cubase. So for example, I have like a drum groove right here. I'm gonna go and open the drum editor. From this point, I'm gonna create a drum map from instruments, and there you go, it's a simple drum groove. And if I open the score editor from this point, and I'm gonna get a good drum looking notation. So this was just a quick and brief look at the new score editor in Cubase. So if you're into this type of feature, there's a lot to dive into. You'll love it. So what else do we have on this new version of Cubase? The Media Previewer extensions, okay? So this is an improvement of the Media Bay player when you preview a loop you want to work with. So if we look at the bottom here, I'm going to use the one from the right zone in this case. And now if you look at the player at the bottom, you see there's way more options here. So for example, if I play this loop, I can change the key straight from the Media Bay player. I can also just change by amount of semitones. And also, let's say in my arrangement in Cubase, I have like a transpose track where I have different key changes within the song itself, I can link the Media Bay player to that transpose track. I can also preview those samples at different tempos, half time, double time. It's pretty cool. We also have nice improvements when it comes to autosave in previous versions of Cubase. All the backup files were located in the same project folder as your CPR files. Now Cubase creates an autosaves folder, and this is where all your backup files are going to be located into. So that's nice. Also, the performance monitor has been revamped, and it looks like this, which is nice because now it's going to show you if you have some overloads going on. So as you can see, I have a bit of dropouts, and it will suggest me some solutions if I have too much. Like for example, change the buffer size, which in my case, it's set up to 32 samples. I set it up this way on purpose just to show you what the monitor performance does. But the cool thing is that now with that recommendation, I can tweak that setting up and bring it to a higher buffer size. So with that adjustment, I won't have any dropouts. So that's pretty cool. But if there's no dropouts going on, you will not have any recommendations. Now, by double clicking on a MIDI channel or an instrument channel, it will create a MIDI part automatically, you know, between a bar or between a selection. And if you keep your finger on command and you double click, it will create a pattern part. Okay, so that's pretty cool. The next one, when we create a ruler track, what we can do is to set up the time offset right at the creation of the track, which can be practical, or we can wait until the track is created and change that from the track itself. So for example, on top, I already have a ruler channel. I can change the starting bar, which is quite nice, straight from this track. I can also set up the offset point to the cursor location by clicking on this little guy here. So that can be a useful feature for some. Now, when opening Cubase, if you keep your finger on Alt or Option, if you're on Mac, you will have this window, which will give you access to other Cubase 14 versions, okay, that are lower than the version you have. So if you have Cubase Artist, you'll have Elements available, Cubase AI, and Cubase LE. That can be practical, especially if you work with someone else that doesn't have your version of Cubase, and you want to make sure that all the features you work with during the production are the same as your friends who is using Cubase Elements, okay, if you're using Artist or Pro, for example. Now, the control room in Cubase 14 looks a bit more modern, a kind of a updated look, and it behaves a bit more like the inspector we have on the left zone. Like for example, these volume LEDs we have on the main mix and Q mix, which is quite nice. The look of the control room level, for example, is also updated, so you'll see a bit of those differences part of the control room. But everything else works the same. Now, when we go in audio connections on top, the cool thing, especially if you work with analog gear or external synths. So let's say I have like my Tegler Creme, who is assigned to these inputs and outputs. In previous versions of Cubase, these outputs and inputs, once they are used, they are not available anymore to anything else, but this has changed for the better. So let's say I only have like one interface that has a limited amount of outputs and inputs. So I use the same in and outs to feed my compressor, but at the same time, my external synth. So I don't need to disconnect and reconnect within the audio connections every time I'm changing devices. Those in and outs are still going to be available even if I already use them on something else. So that can be a time saver. Now, by using the direct offline processing, the addition function will now take into account the volume of the event itself. Okay, so if you change that around, it will be taken care of inside direct offline processing when it comes to addition, the effect you're working on. Okay, the last feature I want to cover in this video, and Honestly, there's more little features and changes that we have with this new versions of Cubase, but I think the video is long enough as it is. But there's one last feature that is quite amazing, and this one is called the DAWProject. So by going on import or export, we have now access to DAW projects, meaning that if you work in collaboration with someone that works with Bitwig or Studio One, you can now share your projects with your collaborators, which is quite impressive. So for example, my friend Mike from the Creative Sauce YouTube channel works with Studio One, and just as a test, saved one of his very simple sessions in a DAWProject file so I can import it in Cubase, which I did. And honestly, it worked perfectly. So this will take into account the global tempo, the global time signature, audio tracks that includes clips,
group channels, effects and output channels, marker tracks, video tracks, folder tracks also, tempo, the time signature, the mix console routing,
and all that stuff. So there's a lot. And this is actually pretty impressive. And so far, Bitwig and Studio One are the two other DAWs on top of Cubase that supports DAWProject. But I'm pretty sure in the near future, more DAWs will join, which is going to be great. So the future is bright. As you can see, there's a lot of new features in Cubase 14. If you want to take a look or upgrade on your side, you can use my affiliate link down below to get a new version of Cubase, or just to upgrade your current version to this new version of Cubase 14. All right, my friend, take care and see you.